Hello everybody, I'm Iain and in this video I want to talk to you about the 10 precepts of Anko Itosu. So Itosu's a hugely influential karate master. He's the guy who made the Pinan or the Heian katas. He's the guy who got karate introduced into the Okinawan school system and eventually, so it spread worldwide. Without an Itosu, there's no modern karate. So in 1908 he wrote a letter outlining what karate was and the benefits of practice, and it's those 10 precepts I want to discuss in this video. We're not going to discuss all 10, I'm just going to draw out some key ones I think are very important that karate can understand, because it tells you the way in which you should view your art. And I think some of what it also tells us is contradictory to what most modern martial artists believe. So I got this translation done from the book Karate Do Taikan, which is, I got a Japanese language of the book way back, decades ago. Got a Japanese version of this book, Japanese language version of it, scanned the page, sent it to a translation company and said, can you translate this page for me? It's Itosu's handwritten letter. They came back to me and said, no, we can't. It's not modern Japanese. We can't in good conscience take your money in order to do this translation. I asked them to see if they could find someone else, and they found someone in the States who could do it for me. So my translation was done from the original handwritten letters, and it was done by a non-martial artist, which I think, an expert in languages but a non-martial artist, which I think is important, because otherwise martial artists can sometimes insert their own thinking inadvertently into the translation. So okay, let's talk about the first thing from Itosu's 10 precepts. So the opening line of Itosu's 10 precepts is not one of the precepts, but it's the opening line, and I think it's very important, is Itosu says karate did not develop from Buddhism or Confucianism. So one of the earliest kind of texts we've got for karate says this link that is sometimes attributed, historical link between the martial arts and Eastern religion and philosophy, says no such link exists, and he's right, no such link did exist. The widespread myth is that Bodhimara, the founder of Zen Buddhism, goes to Shaolin Temple, finds that they're not in good health, teaches them martial arts and forms of exercise. Shaolin martial arts are born and karate has its origins from them. You find that myth repeated in a lot of popular, although not well researched, karate books, and the myth is quite widespread. It's complete BS though, it's not true. The myth of Bodhimara going to the Shaolin Temple originates from a 16th century text called the Muscle Change Classic, which is widely acknowledged to be a forgery. This text came about 1,000 years after Bodhimara was supposed to have visited this temple. It's completely and utterly untrue. It's a forgery, and it's not something any serious historian would put any credence in at all. The reason the myth got so widespread was in the early 1900s, there was a series of novels published called The Travels of Lao San, and in those, again, this myth is repeated that Bodhimara visits the Shaolin Temple. Again, it's drawing on a forged text, and of course, it sounds good and it could maybe serve the political purposes at the time, so everyone kind of uses it to promote karate by putting this link. It'd be like me as an Englishman saying I can trace my karate back to King Arthur or something like that. It's just pick an important historical or mythical or religious figure and then claim origin from it. But it's not true. It's completely and utterly not true. The Zen karate link is widely debunked, and again, any historian of the martial arts or even any historian of Zen and Buddhism will tell you that no such link exists. There's also sources that go back way further than this forged text, 250 years earlier, which mention Bodhimara, which mention the martial arts and make no connection between the two at all. So it's widely debunked, and it also is right to do. The very first thing he does is just say, this thing that people say, not true, and he's right to say that it's not true. So the next line I want to draw out is Itosu says, karate is not only practiced for your benefit, it can be used to protect one's family or master. So I think one of the terms that we sometimes use, with self-defense, that can be a problematic term because it infers that it's the self. Now, obviously under UK law, your right to defend yourself actually comes from a right to use reasonable force to prevent crime. It just happens that you're preventing the crime against yourself. But the same rules apply if you were preventing violence against others. So Itosu says the karate of the time dealt with not just protecting you, but also protecting other people. So I think that's something that we need to be practicing. Certainly it's something we practice in our dojo. We practice getting other people who maybe don't have your skills, out of dangerous situations as well. So hopefully in your life, you've got someone you care about more than you. It's not just about defending you need to be able to defend other people. This was something that was historically practiced in the past, and it's something that we as karateka should be including in our training today. So this next one, really, really important. Those who've been to seminars with me will know that I say that this sentence is the most important sentence in the history of karate because it defines it. So Itosu said, it goes, karate is not for use against a single adversary. It is a method of avoiding harm by using the hands and feet should one by chance be confronted by a villain or ruffian. What he's saying there is the karate of his time, the karate of the katas, is not for a consensual fight with a single opponent. It's not for a fight. It's not for a consensual violence or a duel. It's to keep what you're safe from harm, to avoid injury, not necessarily win, but avoid injury when one is confronted by villains and ruffians. So what he's saying there is it's not for consensual violence against another martial artist, it's for non-consensual violence against a criminal. Okay, so the kata, if you're looking for techniques to outspar a martial artist, you won't find the feints, you won't find the in and out footwork, you won't find any of that. What you will find is methods that are very effective against in that criminal context when someone is just trying to harm you explosively, violently and aggressively, and you're doing your utmost to avoid that. So that if you're looking in the kata for self-defense techniques, you'll find them. If you're looking in the kata for sparring techniques we would use against a fellow martial artist when we duel to an agreed objective, you will not find those. And I think that's one of the more common mistakes that karate can make is they view the kata as being karate versus karate. And it's very clear from this 1908 document that that's not the case. It's not for fighting a single adversary. It's for keeping yourself safe from villains and ruffians, criminals. The next line, again, I think is an important one. So Itosu tells us that we must practice the techniques of karate repeatedly, and then we must decide how and when we would use them. So what he's saying there is, that we will all draw from a collective knowledge pool. So we've got, all the various, kicks, strikes, locks, throws, traps, but we as individuals may employ them differently. So everyone has different psychological, physical abilities, physical structures. So we're not trying to make cookie cutter karate where everyone's the same. We'll all draw from the same knowledge pool, but then we as individuals will make that relevant to us. And it's important, of course, that we pass on that full knowledge pool as well. I mean, I use this example at seminars. I say, if I went to a master and he says, I've got like 100 techniques I want to show you, and I like 10 of them. So I go, right, I'll just practice the 10 that work for me. And then I go to my students, I go, okay, I've got 10 techniques. And then this student goes, well, I like one of them. And then he shows his student, I've got one technique, and the student goes, I don't like it. So if you just practice what's good for you, within 3 or 4 generations, you've killed karate off. The way it should be is we pass the full 100 on, but we decide as individuals which ones we're going to use ourselves. So I make the demarcation between what I call my theoretical knowledge and my practical knowledge. So my theoretical knowledge is all the things that I know, the hundreds of throws, locks, chokes, strangles. The practical knowledge is a much smaller set of skills that fit me perfectly, that I know I can work with a good degree of consistency when under pressure. So it also encourages us to do that. That's something we should do. We should demarcate between our practical knowledge box and our theoretical knowledge box. Your practical knowledge box needs to be yours based on your own abilities, attributes, likes and dislikes. So Itosu is a great innovator. He's the guy who realizes that, karate has benefits, health benefits and character development benefits, and he could use that to get karate introduced into the Okinawan school system, and from there it would spread more widely. But it's clear that there's a demarcation to be made there. He says you must decide whether karate is for its practical use or for your health. So again, if you're practicing it as an art form and just for the health and enjoyment of it, that's fine and valid. That's a very noble thing to do, and it's a valid goal. But you've got to acknowledge that that does not give you self-defense skills. It doesn't give you practical skills. So we need to make sure there's a demarcation there. I think one of the problems that modern karate has, it tries to be all things to all people, and it gets a little bit blurred. You can train, it's my view, that you can train for, for sport or fighting each other. You can train for self-defense. You can train for health and fitness, and you can do all of that. And there's benefits to doing that. But you need to be clear on what you're training for at any given moment. And I think we find this echoed in Itosu's precept there. If you're doing this, we're doing some head-eye kicking, this is for fighting or just for flexibility or leg strength or whatever it happens to be, that's fine. But you wouldn't use the head-eye kicking in reality unless you're an incredibly skilled kicker, and most of us are not that skilled. It's just far too risky a maneuver. So are we practicing karate for self-defense benefits, or are we practicing it for health? And I don't think you need to make that choice like starkly and forever. I just think in any given moment you need to say, am I doing this for practical purposes, or am I doing this for some other purpose? And again, we're wise to follow Itosu's advice there to keep that demarcation clear. So there's a lot more we could discuss, there's a lot more in that document. If you want a more detailed exploration of them, there's an article and a podcast on that on my website. If you just type Iain Abernethy, 10 Precepts Itosu into Google. I'm sure you'll find them. They'll be up there near the top. But hopefully this video has given you a little bit of food for thought. I think it is important that we look back at the way the old masters were practicing and the way they were thinking, because I think sometimes what we regard as being traditional today, we can see isn't. So for example, a lot of people today think there is this link between religion and philosophy in karate, and Itosu is clear there isn't. A lot of people kind of mistake what karate of the kata's for, and it's not for fighting another martial artist, it's for self-defense. And again, Itosu is clear about this. We get confused that we're doing it for health benefits or practical purposes, and Itosu reminds us to keep that distinction clear. We think about self-defense and not about protecting others, and Itosu reminds us to keep that wider idea. And a lot of modern karate today has this idea that everybody learns the same thing and everyone's got to be the same, but we can see that Itosu was telling us, no, you learn all the moves, but you decide how and when you would use them. There's a level of individualism in there which is very important. So as I say, traditional, to me, traditional means a thing that's been around the longest, and a lot of what people regard traditional, ironically, isn't. It's modern, 1940s onwards. If we go back further than that, and then we look at what they were doing back then, for me, that's the more interesting form of karate, that's the more logical form of karate, and that's the kind that I want to practice.